What movie had a happy ending until you consider what had to happen next? At the end of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, you just know that Cameron is gonna get the crap kicked out of him by his dad. In law school we wrote a memo arguing for or against Cam's dad's auto insurance claim. It was hilarious the first time I read the fact pattern and realized it was Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Less enjoyable the 30th time. The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy wakes up and tells people about her silly dream. That's great. Miss Gulch is still going to kill Toto tomorrow. For some reason I always assumed Miss Gulch was killed in the tornado. Braveheart. I mean, the movie is historically inaccurate, but it ends at the Battle of Bannockburn, where the narrator says they won their freedom. But this freedom only lasted for like 5 years before war broke out again. Now that our time has come to fight. Up. Little kid's dad bailed on him and his only friend is old as frick and knocking on death's door. Breakfast Club has already been mentioned, but Bender most likely went home and got beaten by his dad again after the movie ended. The Truman Show. This guy has no idea what the real is like and he is just thrown into it. Most people have 18 years of preparation. Be realistic. He sued them into freaking oblivion. Toy Story 3. It's all going to happen to them, again, in another 10 years, and they are going to do that for the rest of their lives. The one I remember is Robin from the Dark Knight trilogy. Batman had handed the mantle to a guy who had no training, which is a lot of implications lol. Nah, Robin just sold all the fancy crap he had in the cave and moved to a town with less supervillains. The Prince of Egypt. Moses frees his people, only to get totally dicked over by them and their dang cow. Yeah, that last shot is about 45 seconds before he throws those tablets into an idol and all of the Hebrews are exiled to the desert wilderness for 40+ years. Beauty and the Beast would most likely end with a Robespierre-style uprising. That, and they would have no furniture. The day after tomorrow. It isn't hugs and giggles. Things do not go back to normal. The human race got a major B-slap. Much of the upper hemisphere is covered in ice. Let's not mince words. A few billion people died. Whole nations were wiped off the map. Yes, you have survivors, but ponder this. Food, a huge section of the world's agriculture was taken away. How are you going to feed the remaining masses doesn't include shelter. Those lucky ones, who were on the edge of the frost are going to move further down, South America and Africa. While true, the ice will melt. Eventually, this massive snow front will have a huge effect on global climates. Colder, sunlight being reflected off the surface, rather than absorbed. The survivors will have such terrible hardships ahead. It will take a generation or more to bounce back. I'm not even talking about political turmoil. Warlords, tyrants and dictators will rise to power. Wars over limited resources. The movie ends with our gang getting picked up by what remains of the US government. The future is so uncertain. Many more will perish from harsh weather, starvation, sickness and or hostilities. We don't just hold hands and sing Kumbaya. The human race will suffer with huge blood losses to come. Dang, I want to see this sequel. The original ending of Office Space. Inspired by WALL-E, where it would still take decades before the people were actually able to live off the earth, and their quality of life would still be awful compared to their lives in the ship. Return of the Jedi. I'm not familiar with any of the Star Wars expanded universe, but I would imagine that the collapse of a political entity as large as the Galactic Empire would be extremely messy. You just get a situation where the various Moffs still existed even in the absence of their emperor. Losing a second Death Star is a big blow, but there was still regional control from the Moffs. Jurassic World. After the survivors escape from the theme park, they file a class action lawsuit against the company that owns the park, the directors, and officers, alleging their negligence allowed the dinosaurs to escape and kill people. The FBI also investigate whether the company was criminally negligent. The Jurassic World company goes bankrupt and Bryce Dallas Howard's character goes to jail. Monsters Inc. There's a reason they made a prequel and not a sequel. Laughter being 10 times more powerful means a lot of factory monsters would have lost their jobs, even accounting for the energy crisis. Not to mention it's at least 10 times harder to gather laughs than screams. I'm pretty sure that kids are still going to freak out and cry if a monster just waltzes into their room and does stand up. Not to mention that the monsters need reminders that punchline does not mean hit the kid. Rent. Mimi has AIDS. She'll definitely be dead soon. Roger and Collins have HIV in the 80s. They'll probably be dead soon. Mark is all alone and is gonna watch his best friends die. Joanne and Maureen might get a happy ending though. Probably, if Joanne and Maureen could stop breaking up with each other and getting back together all the time. I also see Mark leaving his bohemian lifestyle to take a well-paying job after his friends die and being supremely miserable the rest of his life because he never got to fulfill his dream. Avatar. You think humans didn't come back with a fleet full of orbital death? There are sequels on the horizon for Avatar, so I guess we'll find out. Oblivion. Even after solving what killed the planet is still dead, with at least 55 more Tom Cruises flying about. I shiver at the thought of that many Tom Cruises. X-Men Days of Future Past. Considering how Logan starts out, things didn't end well despite the happy ending. Small soldiers. Gorgon isn't real. Those toys are just going to capsize in that lake and die. Come to think of it, after all the crap Alan went through, I'm sure he was just happy to get rid of them. Taken. Liam Neeson gets arrested for mass murder. If we consider Taken 2, it isn't a happy ending, not only for that but also because his wife gets kidnapped by the revenge-seeking relatives of those he killed in the first film. Back to the Future. You still keep the guy who full-on tried to violate Lorraine, your wife, around and in employ? Why? Think McFly. Think. Olympus London has fallen. I guess we could count White House down on this list too. Western world leaders' governments are shown to be incredibly vulnerable to terrorist attacks. Even in the most secure home office building in the heavily guarded capital city of the most powerful nation on earth, or at the most heavily guarded event within the capital of one of the strongest nations on earth. Mockingjay Part 2. There's most likely going to be pro-Snow supporters, loyalists, especially in the capital and peacekeeping ranks. Some loyal general could very well have hid out in the Canadian North or Mexican jungles or Rocky Mountains with a sizable number of peacekeeper, possibly plotting a counter-revolution, coup, or outright declaring independence from Panem. James Cameron's Avatar. Let's be really honest here, the RDA will very likely come back to Pandora with much deadlier firepower and in much greater quantity. No corporation of that scale will just abandon a planet moon rich in unobtainium. Heck, they might even have more dragon gunships on the way, maybe even fighter jets. No Banshee or Great Lianathrix can effectively take out fighter jets going 1,000 plus miles. Not a movie, but whatever. Avatar, Legend of Korra. The Earth Kingdom Empire is now going to be in ruins. A bunch of independent states may likely breed another Kuvira-like dictator with an imperialistic vision to reunite the Earth Kingdom again. Even if another imperialistic dictator doesn't conquer the other independent EK states, bandits are now going to all come back and anarchy will plague certain areas. It'll probably take decades for things to settle down and to ensure that all of the now independent Earth Kingdom states don't collapse and become a failed state. Also, spirit weapons are now going to be a thing. In the end of Mockingjay the book, it was at least 15 years between the end of the rebellion and Katniss having kids, so pro-Snow people might be gone. But to me the realization is that in the time period no one has mentioned any surviving nations other than Panem. You would think during that time period someone would have made an attempt to contact the outside world and let Katniss know. Source code. Maybe someone can explain this one to me, but as far as I can see, the movie ends with everyone being saved, except for the dude that Jake Gyllenhaal's character is now essentially possessing. What happens when he has to go to family gatherings? Does he even know where he lives? How is he supposed to explain not remembering any of his life so far, unless his consciousness is supposed to have somehow merged with the guy his mind is in? The Sound of Music. The nuns were almost definitely executed by the Nazis as soon as it became apparent they helped the family escape. Fun fact. The Sound of Music was based on a true story. In real life there wasn't all the intrigue of the nuns hiding them in the monastery and then helping them escape. So in real life, no nuns were executed by the Nazis for helping the Von Trapp family get out of Austria. James Cameron's Avatar. When the humans get back to Earth, they will not tell the story the way we saw it happen. The story the Earth gets will go along the lines of, the natives were totally hostile for no freaking reason and we were forced to flee the area after they committed a mass slaughter of ground personnel. All our totally genuine attempts at diplomacy were met with hostility and savagery. The humans will return and orbital bombard that little moon to dust, and when the smoke is cleared, strip mine it down to a small and stable asteroid and move on. Almost any horror movie where one character makes it through the entire movie and is the last man standing. Actually, usually a female, covered in blood and surrounded by dead bodies. What happens when the police arrive? Oh Heidi ho officer, we've had a doozy of a day. Whiplash. Outwardly, it seems like a happy ending. Andrew proves Fletcher wrong and showcases his abilities as a musician. However, that's exactly what Fletcher wanted and proved that his abusive teaching style works. All Fletcher wanted was his Charlie Parker. That's why he was so angry when his former student died. He thought he was going to fill that role. When Andrew begins his solo, at first Fletcher is clearly mad and confused. But as Andrew continues, Fletcher guides him and the movie ends with them sharing eye contact before finishing the song. With this, Andrew becomes his Charlie Parker, something Fletcher can put on a pedestal and say, I created that talent. You also have to consider what happens to Andrew after this. He goes right back into the abuse he suffered from under Fletcher and loses all the love and enjoyment that he has for jazz music. In my opinion, I see Andrew having a similar fate with either the real Charlie Parker, addict who died of an overdose at 34, or of Fletcher's former student, suicide. Literally every rom-com ever, they like the idea of a new romance, the flair of falling in love with a new person, and the excitement of getting married. Remember how you made googly eyes and wooed her and she promptly left her stable, and obviously totally boring, relationship for you? Yeah, guess what, champ? Give it a little bit and it'll happen again, except you'll be the boring guy that gets left behind. I want to see a movie about the boring guy, like Carrie Elwes plays a nice guy with a stable job who keeps falling in love with single moms until their fun-loving ex-husbands show up out of nowhere, embarrasses him and then steals his girl back. He eventually snaps and goes on a quest to hunt down and kill man-children. Zootopia. The whole plot of the movie hinges on reshaping the natural order by all living in unity. That's great, right until you realize that herbivores are still super good at reproducing to make up for carnivores, as shown by the rabbit population sign counter going up at a ridiculous rate. Gag. Except nobody's eating them anymore. By the end of the movie, it's also revealed that there's herbivore extremists which wants to take it further and get rid of carnivores. Overpopulation and possibly genocide is on its way. Life is Zootopia will be the sequel. Repo, the genetic opera. She's free of the medication making her sick. Yay. But she's no social skills, no friends, no money and no family left. I like to think Graveraba planned this whole thing partially to recruit Shiloh as his apprentice, hence the whole explanation on who he is, what he does, and why he does it. Look up the cutscene Needle into a Bug. Kate and Leopold. Kate finds out that she can't vote or own property anymore now that she's in the past. Also, she has to live with the knowledge that she porked her own grandson. Avengers. Everyone is sitting around having coffee and they are still pulling bodies out of the rubble. Someone had better draft some accords about that. Consider Mary Poppins. Consider the boy from Mary Poppins. Consider the movie was set in 1910. And near the end, they were drafting the older gents too, so dad would have gone, and mum and daughter most likely had nurses. I guess you can wonder what sort of reprisals the people of Casablanca will suffer after Strasser is murdered. Snowpiercer. Best case, Yona and Timmy are quickly killed by a polar bear. Worst case, Yona and Timmy starved to death in a frozen wasteland. Spoiler. I didn't think that had a happy ending to begin with. Mad Max. Fury Road. They just open up the mains and empty out the water onto everyone below the citadel. Immortan may have been a brutal dictatorial monster, but he managed those resources. They're going to deplete that reservoir in no time. I assumed that was a temporary celebratory thing. They would figure out a more fair way to distribute water later. Forrest Gump. Jenny dies of AIDS. Forrest is married to Jenny. Married people make love unprotected. Low transmission rates from female to male. It's Forrest Jr. that you should be worried about. Back to the Future. Marty is now essentially living with a family of strangers. It's not going to take them too long to realize he has no knowledge of any conversation they've ever had or anything they've ever done together. Also, let's just keep that guy who tried to violate your mom around so he can wash our car. And why does our son seem to look exactly like that guy from high school? The Truman Show. He walks through that door into years of deep therapy and into a world where millions of people know every detail of his entire life. Finding Nemo. How are the fish gonna get out of those plastic bags? They're probably dead. One of them even says, "Now what?" I like to think that bloat figured out how to pop the bags by swimming around when he puffed up. They're in Finding Dory, doing well. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Spoilers below. It seems as though they were meant for each other because even with no memory of each other, they still find each other and fall in love. As the movie foreshadows with repeating glitching the last shot of the film, they are doomed to a cycle of meeting, falling in love, breaking up, heartbreak, erasing their memories about the other and repeat. Get Out. This whole white family is murdered and the only survivor is a blood-soaked black guy in the uppity suburbs. Seriously good movie. One of the best I've seen in years. But I left the theater and the first thing I said to my husband was that investigation is not going to go well for him. Any movie where a wedding is interrupted by someone falling in love with a bride or groom and them leaving. You've just wasted a lot of people's time and possibly a lot of money wasted by the effort. V for Vendetta. The brutal coup that would follow. Fight Club. Tyler 1. The whole credit system there is fricked and everything is wiped clean. Not to mention Project Mayhem isn't simply going to disband. I think Fight Club was meant to end on an unhappy note. Yeah, Tyler accomplished what he set out to do, but Ed Norton was trying to stop the disaster for the last half hour of the movie. It happened. It's a mess, but the leader is gone. You've been visited by the toothpaste man for good teeth and fresh breath. Comment oh fresh. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check out another video. Or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.